You're listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zeno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground Podcast. We always appreciate you spending some time with us. Before we get to this week's episode, some homework for you guys. Want to remind you to go to all our social media sites. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Remind you guys we're also on Spotify. But if you get on iTunes, leave us a rating and a review. Those reviews really help us out and let us know what you like, what you don't like. But it also helps create popularity for the podcast and lets us get bigger and better guests and do more things that you guys are really enjoying. Finally, our website is live, hazardground.com. You can go there, check out past episodes, more photos, pictures, bios of our guests, and everything like that. So check out hazardground.com. This week's guest got out of the Navy as a retired E6. He was also a Navy SEAL who spent 2 deployments, one in Iraq, one in Afghanistan. He created the foundation Mission Memorial Day, and he also is the record holder for climbing every single 14,000-foot peak in the state of Colorado in just 138 days. He is Josh Jespersen, and he joins us on the Hazard Ground Podcast. Josh, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Glad to be here.
All right, so your post-military career, very, very interesting, but let's start back at the beginning. Why did you sign up for the Navy?
Oh, why did I sign up for the Navy? Well, I got the go to war, go to jail card. I got arrested in high school, and they basically.
That's funny that you phrased it that way.
Yeah. I guess they're not supposed to really do that anymore, but I'm glad they made an exception for me. I got arrested in high school and in Pennsylvania for possession of marijuana, which I now live in a state where it's legal. So it's kind of funny.
The ultimate irony.
Yeah. Totally, completely ultimate irony. But that happened, and I told them, I had plans of joining the military anyway. I was going to try to go to college first. I've got pretty big military family history, so that was the plan anyway. Just this expedited it, and I was going to go to the Marine recruiter, and then I was watching the Discovery Channel the night before and saw that old Buds Class 234 special. You ever see that?
Yeah, familiar.
Yeah. So I saw that and I was like, that looks way cooler. And the next day I went to the Navy recruiter.
All right, so hold on a second.
Signed on the dotted line. Yeah.
All right. One, tell me the story how you got caught, because I'm just curious to know what you were doing and kind of the background to that. But also, did you know what you were getting into when you went for Buds? I mean, I know it looks cool when they put it on TV, but clearly what's on the other side of that is a whole different world.
Right. Yeah. No, those are 2 good questions, actually. So I got caught, probably when I got caught and got charged, I was on probation from getting arrested previously with a small amount of weed again in a state that I now live in is legal. The irony is very prevalent in my mind. But anyway, so I was on probation, and I was actually following all the rules, being completely clean and all that. But one of my friends was also on probation and didn't show up for their meeting or something. So the cops decided to come search my house for him, which was weird. And a buddy of mine was living with me, and he wasn't on probation. So he was, smoking weed and enjoying life.
Right.
And when they searched my house, they found the stuff that he had, and I basically got charged for it.
Oh, classic. So, it's not my weed, man. It's not my weed.
Yeah, but it really wasn't.
It really wasn't your weed.
Yeah. So, but I mean, if it wouldn't have happened, man, I wouldn't have joined the SEAL team. So I guess I'm glad I got in trouble in that roundabout
What year was
way.
this when it happened?
2005, actually, yeah.
So I guess, you had preconceived notions, you said, of joining the military. Was that just something you told them in court, or was that legit? And what was leading you to it? Just your past family history?
Yeah, no, that was legit. I pretty much kind of my last year or 2 in high school had really settled on joining the military. Like most people of my age and generation, I remember, watching 9/11 in my ninth grade history class. You know, they put it on all the TVs in our school, and obviously that was one huge motivator. And my family history in the military too. So, but I was going to go try and play soccer in college beforehand. Whether I was really good enough to make the team or not, I don't know, but I was going to give it a shot. And then, yeah, so that whole process got expedited. And then you were asking if I really knew what was going on in Buds?
Well, but before you get into the Buds, can you request that with a Navy enlistment? Like, hey, I want to go be a SEAL and go to Buds, or do you have to go through a regular, naval basic training? Basically, I mean, I understand how you enlist, but can you get that in your contract?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
It's different now compared to when I joined. When I joined, you could get it in your contract, but you had to go to a different A school first, which, you know, is
right.
different jobs. So I had to go to, actually there's like a number of different rates you can choose. And I asked the recruiter, I was like, well, which one's the shortest one? And they're like, SK school, which is supply school. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, all right, send me to that one. And they were like, are you sure you don't want to go to like a job that you'll enjoy or make sense? I'm like, nope, get me through it as fast as possible. Just get me to Buds ASAP. So if I wouldn't have made it, I would have really screwed myself. But that wasn't like the mindset I went into it with. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, so I certainly understand.
Planning on not making it.
Well, but it is a little bit of a roll of the dice, because sometimes, you know, even plenty of guys who plan to go to Buds and plan to be a SEAL, doesn't work out that way for them.
Yep, totally. Huge roll of the dice. I was just a kind of naive 18-year-old. Didn't really know what was going on.
I
wanted the fast track.
Yeah, I love the hearing about the Buds experience, because it's different for everybody. And Buds, for those who are listening, basic underwater demolition. What's the S stand for? I forget.
SEAL training.
SEAL training.
Underwater demolition, okay. SEAL training.
Yeah, 3 out of 4 wasn't bad. All right, so
yeah.
Buds, basic underwater demolition SEAL training. So that is where you get your start. Tell me about your first day in and everything else.
Yeah. First day at Buds?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, you asked how much I knew what was going on. I really had no clue what I was getting myself into. We started, you know, first phase, and before first phase, you kind of get, it's called INDOC, and you get kind of an intro of, you know, what the really shitty stuff is going to be like. But I didn't really have a grasp of what I was getting into. You know, on the first day, we show up super early in the morning, and you get surf tortured, and a ton of push-ups, ton of pull-ups, and all that stuff. And then they're like, log PT's next. And I looked over to the dude next to me, who's a buddy of mine. He's still in, I think. But I was like, what's log PT, man? And he's like, he looked at me like, are you fucking kidding me? You're here the first day of Buds and you don't even know what log PT is? I was like, no, just tell me. So yeah, most everybody who goes into Buds kind of, you know, has, has read the books or has an idea of what they're going into, but I really had no clue, man. I just saw that Discovery Channel thing and I was like, that looks rad. That looks fun. I'm going to go and try to do that.
So give me the rest of the experience. I mean, obviously you passed, but did you get to a point where you thought you wanted to quit? You watched other guys quit and walk out, other guys get hurt and not make it. What was your experience?
Yeah, no. Some people like to say that if you didn't think about quitting while you're in Buds, then you didn't go through Buds, but I didn't experience that. I mean, I think those guys are a little full of shit. I didn't ever, you know, think about quitting, but I did think that if I, on like Thursday Hell Week, I did think stuff like, man, if I stepped in this pothole and twisted my ankle, I might get rolled forward, you know? Or like,
right.
But there's also the danger of getting rolled backwards. So I never took that chance. But like when I'd see people quitting, man, it was kind of more like, okay, you ring the bell. I'm going to eat the rest of your MRE. You know, I was kind of like, okay, see you later. I didn't really have any remorse. There was this one time in our Hell Week that our class OIC stood up and went to go ring the bell. And like when the class OIC stands up to go quit, you know, people are kind of like, whoa, that guy's leaving? And he was pretty respected. I mean, he was a really cool dude. I can't remember his actual name, but he was really, really good guy. and he went up to quit, and no shit, like a line of like 25 dudes formed behind him.
Wow.
And they all just stood there one by one, just ringing the bell. And all of us that didn't go up, we were just kind of looking around, like, is anybody else going? Are you going to eat the brownie in your MRE? Like, have your bacon cheese spread? I never experienced the, should I quit? That guy's quitting. Maybe I should too. I never had those thoughts.
What did the instructors say when that whole event happened? I mean, usually I think sometimes instructors, not like they take pride in it, but they just realize that this isn't for everybody, and weeding out the ones who don't belong there, there's almost a sense of pride in.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Two little stories there. So that when the 20 want to quit behind our OIC, usually they don't care at all. Usually they're like, all right, cool, go ring the bell. There's hot chocolate in the Humvee for you, but there's never hot chocolate for those guys. That's a joke. But so this one guy got up to go quit, and his brother was in the teams, and like a really respected dude. And before he rung the bell, the instructors kind of pulled him aside and were like, hey, are you sure, man? And they tried to talk him out of it, which, I mean, I thought was kind of bullshit. If it even enters his mind to quit, then just let him go.
Right.
But that was the only time I kind of saw the instructors like try to reel somebody in. And then another time, so in BUDS, when you have a class going through a certain phase, you have a certain person from the instructor staff who's the class proctor. It's like his job to take care of the class and stuff like that. Usually they're dicks and they don't take care of the class at all. They just, it's their role and they don't really do anything for the class. But sometimes those guys are really awesome dudes and they do take care of the class. So when I was in first phase, our proctor was a great dude, awesome dude. But in like the first 2 weeks of first phase, he'd walk around and kind of like take tabs and, see the guys who weren't really pulling their own weight. And one day he got up in front of our class and he's like, I'm going to read this list of names off. And I think the list was like 30 or 40 dudes. He's like, I'm going to read this list of names off. And if you don't come up here and ring this bell right now, I'm going to make you quit by the end of the night. And so he read that list of names off, and every single dude besides one guy, no shit, went and DOR'd on the spot. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen.
And what happened to the one guy who didn't? Did he end up staying or he ended up quitting?
No, he had a rough night and quit the next morning.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, you went through the whole thing, so it's hard for me. It's funny because I've never really interviewed anybody or talked to anybody who went through BUDS and quit. Or even, on the armor side, went to SF and then quit because those people never talk about it. But it's just, to me,
right?
that feeling of, I hate saying the word quitting because these guys aren't quitters. It's just that not everybody in the military is designed for that level of what we're asking them to do. And that doesn't make them bad soldiers or bad, airmen or bad sailors or whatever it is. It just, they're not designed for that. So when you look back on that whole experience and you watch all those people walk out, how do you look at those? Do you look back on them as guys who just couldn't hack it, or is it just, hey, this wasn't for them?
No, I'm totally with you. It's really just, for a lot of people, it's not that they can't hack it. It's just, they might have thought like, man, I just don't want to be in a job where I just have to embrace the suck all day, every day. Because, the stuff you do in BUDS just prepares you for the teams. I mean, I had way shittier days in the teams than I ever did in BUDS. So yeah, they're not quitters in my eyes. I mean, they did quit, but they're not necessarily quitters.
Right.
I totally see it the same way you're trying to articulate that thought. It's just, it's not for them, and there's a lot of guys in BUDS too, who came back a second time after quitting. Probably, I don't know, maybe a third or half of my class were previous quitters who, went back to the fleet and decided they want to give BUDS a second or third try. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of good.
I'm sorry to cut you
Go
off.
ahead.
I meant to ask, does that speak to the mental aspect of things that, a lot of times, as you mentioned, it's embracing the suck every day. And so for those guys, mentally, it wears on them more than it does physically, no?
Some guys, yeah, but there's also a lot of guys where their bodies just can't hold up. That's another huge attrition factor in buds. Some guys just genetically or physically just cannot take that beating all day, every day. And so, those guys get med dropped at times. Performance dropped is a big thing. Like there was in first phase, probably like 2 or 3 weeks in, there was like 10 guys that just one day were gone. And they had all gotten performance dropped because in buds, you do a lot of stuff with boats where you have to put the boats and the logs over your head.
Right.
And you're just constantly holding them over your head. And those guys, at some point, they literally weren't able to hold their arms above their shoulders anymore. So just the muscle fatigue was like that great, and they just couldn't overcome it. So they just performance dropped all those guys. They didn't roll them or anything. They just kicked them all out of the program. So yeah, there's a lot of guys that just physically, even if their head is in the right place, their body just physically can't keep up with it.
All right. Final question on buds. How many guys started in your class and how many finished?
I think I always forget the exact numbers, but I think we started with like 220 and finished with like 40 or something like that.
About 20%. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge drop in numbers for sure. And that doesn't even, we started first phase with 220. There's a period before first phase called indocs that some people get weeded out as well. And then there's another program after buds called SQT where some people get weeded out from there as well. So the numbers kind of constantly dwindle.
What was the day like when you got your trident and they slapped it on your chest? And, what was that moment like for you?
Oh man, it was really cool. My grandparents from both sides came out to see me in Coronado, and like my grandfather that was in World War II was there for the ceremony, so that was really awesome. Yeah, and it was just, man, it was huge, honestly. But when you show up to a team, you get it taken away, and while you're a new guy, you spend this whole kind of probationary period in your first platoon, and they take your trident away from you, and we put it in a thing. That's kind of our traditions and our ceremonies. But when you get it back the second time, and all your boys that are in your platoon and you're going to go to war with, and they all pin it on your chest, that's the time that it really matters. Like that was the really cool one for me.
Wow. I definitely want to hear that story because I think it's very pointed. I guess to a lot of the non-military folks listening, in football camps, they do that a lot. They don't put the stickers on the helmet until the guys have earned it. It's like you made the team, but they don't put the sticker on the helmet until they get to a certain point where they've proven that they've earned that. I know we talked about, obviously, in the intro that you left the military. Where is your trident now?
It's in a drawer, just tucked away with my blood stain still on it from when I got blood pinned.
All right.
Yeah, I've got a little drawer with like some other memorabilia like that just kind of stays tucked away.
All right, good stuff. So let's fast forward. So you get to your team. Where are you right now as far as, physically, geographically in the world, and when do you get to your first deployment?
Yeah, so I got to my team in 2007. I went to Team 4 on the East Coast, Virginia Beach.
Nice.
And, yeah, good spot, man. I really like Virginia Beach. A lot of guys say they hate it, but, I think once you settle in and figure out, like, the local rhythm, it's just a laid-back beach town. And I had a lot of fun there. But anyway, and then we deployed to Baghdad in 2008.
All right.
Yeah, for a good 6-month deployment.
What was your mission there in Baghdad? Were you supporting anybody directly, and what were your expectations going in?
Going in, I knew we were straight up door kicking. The platoon that was there before us was there in wintertime. In summertime, and they had some big ticks and some big things happen, and the mission itself that we were doing historically had some big ticks and big things happening. So we went into it like knowing that we were going into a conflict, kind of into war, and we knew we were going to be kicking indoors and going after bad guys. And as a new guy, like going into it, my role was pretty much just be the guy who goes where he's told. And I carried around this thing called the Donker, which was our little door battering ram. So every single target we hit, I was either the guy to bash down the door, or if we were pulling cord on, I was the guy outside with a machine gun. So as the new guy, it's just basically my job to carry all the heavy shit around.
Yeah, and you see that in the movies and everything else. How frustrating is that, and what do you have to do to get to a point where your team leader is going to look at you and say, "All right, Josh, you're ready. You're coming in on this one."
Yeah, I mean, it's not frustrating to us as new guys in the teams, because that's our job. We're the new guys. We're there. We have to do this whole first deployment, prove ourselves before we can be like fire team leader and get any more responsibility. I mean, you have a ton of responsibility as a new guy, with all kinds of different stuff. But, as far as missions go, like you're just a meat, you're getting put in different places and doing, kind of a head down job rather than, comms or like JTAC or stuff like that. Some new guys get those roles, but, mine was kind of more carry the heavy shit. But, if you just work hard and prove yourself the whole time, I think eventually, the older guys see you as somebody who can take charge and be a leader. And it usually happens like your second deployment.
Were you the type of guy who was asking when that was going to happen, or you just kept your mouth shut the whole time and waited to be told?
If you ask that type of stuff as a new guy, it's just worse for you. There's in the SEAL teams, there's no, you keep your mouth shut as a new guy. That's just the way it is. There were a few times when I didn't realize that, and I got socked in the face. But that's the nature of the military too. If you speak out of line, you're going to get put in your place. And I think that's why the military works so well, is because we operate in that way. If that makes any sense. When
you say socked in the face, is that a literal term or a figurative one?
Oh, both. For sure. Yeah.
just making sure what we're talking about.
Yeah. But, in that job, there's no resentment towards that type of thing. It's just, hey, here's the lesson that you just had to learn physically, and you're going to remember it better that way. So, anytime any of us, get told to go behind the Connex box, it's always a good lesson in the military in that sense, I feel like.
No, and that's fair. I think that at the end of the day, in that environment, and again, for those who haven't been there or ever operated, I was fortunate enough that I deployed with the Special Forces in the Army for 15 months. So I got a small taste of that environment and that life, and all of that is designed for the greater good. There's nothing about it that isn't making everybody better and in the best interest of making sure everybody's safe and everybody's working together and in harmony and all those things, because there's not a lot of room when you're talking about that high level of professionalism. There's not a lot of room for personal stuff or me first attitudes. It just doesn't survive.
No, yeah, absolutely. Like that stuff has to go away. If you're a type of person that thinks only of themselves, you're not going to be there for the greater good. You're not going to be a good contributor to the high level team that you're working on.
So looking back on your first deployment, was it satisfying? Was it gratifying? Is it what you thought it was going to be as a team member?
Yeah. It was satisfying and it was gratifying, and we did a lot of really good work for sure. The 2 platoons before we were there, so basically like 6 months before we got there and before that, those guys did a shitload of insanely good work. They were on the ball, and they killed a lot of bad guys. And so by the time we got there, the network that we were going after was really dwindled down. And they basically, like, their morale was broken and they just had no desire to fight us. So we didn't get in like a whole lot of gunfights or anything like that deployment. We did some small ones. We didn't lose anybody. The bad guys lost people, but we still did a ton of good work. We were out there, capturing a ton of bad guys. But like I said, they didn't have the desire to fight us because they knew they would just lose at that point after 2 platoons and the platoon prior to us, had such a strong representation there. But yeah, I really thought it was an awesome deployment. We went on a ton of missions, and I got to see, like, kind of in the people that we were doing good things there. Mostly with our interpreter. He wrote a book called Codename Johnny Walker, actually. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but
no.
Really, really, really awesome dude. He might be a good one for the podcast. But yeah, he's incredible. I mean, he was working with the SEAL teams over there for, I don't know, almost 10 years. Just going on DA after DA. And this guy was incredible. And his family started getting death threats eventually. So because he worked with us so long, we were able to secure him a green card, and he now lives in San Diego.
Oh, wow.
Totally free from having to worry about the safety of his children or his family. I mean, yeah, that guy did so much good work for us. Our community was able to do something really good for him. So that was another piece of the good work over there that I thought we did that I am able to see.
And when Josh says DA, it's just direct action. It's short.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's my job, just to explain that to everybody. It's funny you mentioned that. My interpreter I had with me on my first deployment, probably about 12 of the 15 months I was there, and real great guy. Like, we got along really, really well. It was just like, that became my best friend there, because every day we were standing next to each other for hours on end. No matter what was going on, and you just end up talking to these guys, and you strike up a great relationship with them. And he actually lives in Europe now. He left the Middle East. He was an Iraqi, born guy, and he ended up leaving the Middle East, and he's got a wife and kid now in Norway. And but you mentioned that, and it's just to kind of rung my bell a little bit about he called himself Bubba, not Johnny Walker. He just called himself Bubba. So it's for those listening, all interpreters give themselves code names. They don't actually use their real name, even though I knew what his real name was. No one ever called him that, and he didn't like to be called that even around the Iraqis, because a lot of times those guys, as you mentioned, we become a danger. So every now and then they try to sneak a mole in who was working with the Americans to get information, this, that, and the other. And anyway, I digress. Let me get back to your Trident. Did you get it back on that first deployment or no?
So right before, usually our the whole process we kind of go through is you show up to your team, you get your Trident taken away. You spend basically the next year and a half during your workup cycle earning the respect of your elders and proving yourself. And we have some things that we go through, some review boards and other stuff directly before you deploy. And that's when the repinning takes place, when you've passed all those things.
Were you anticipating it happening after that review board?
Yeah, I thought I did really well. The review board, it's funny in the review board, like, no matter how prepared you are for all the questions you're going to ask, you go into this room, and so you're basically part of a troop at a SEAL team. In my time, there were 3 troops, which were made up of 2 platoons, and our 2 platoons would travel together. So I'd go into this room, and it would have all 30, so probably like 25 guys, actually, because a platoon is made up of 16. Some of those guys are new guys, right? Mm-hmm. So some of those guys are going in for the review boards. So all the head shed and all the older guys would be sitting in this room, and of course they're all drinking and dipping and, trying to be intimidating. And so you walk in, and I'm this new guy and just like kind of shit my pants. Like, oh shit, they're going to ask me all these questions. I mean, even though I knew I was going to answer all the questions and, do a good job, it's still nerve-wracking. Really, just like I was kind of shaking in my voice the whole time, even though I was trying my hardest, not to.
Sure.
but they ask you like, technical questions, and they ask you morality questions, and they ask you all kinds of stuff like that. But like my highlight in the thing was, at the very end, after I had gone through and like crushed it all, they were like, all right, JJ, so you have this one chance to tell the senior chief and the like troop OIC, what you think. And, so I told the senior chief one thing, and then I looked at the troop OIC, and I told him that he basically lets the senior chief walk all over him. And everybody cheered me out of the room. So I was like, all right, cool. Yeah, I'm getting my trident.
So, and who told you
Yeah,
who told you that it was happening, and what was that moment?
So basically, after you get out of the board, we all have this person in our platoon called our C Daddy, who's basically the guy who watches over us. And yeah, exactly. And, he came out afterwards and, was like, dude, you crushed it. You're good, man. Did a really good job. So if you fail that, I think, I've seen like one or two people not earn their trident in that way. And I don't know if they ever eventually earned it back or not. So yeah, I don't know what happens if you really fail. Actually, I've never seen the outcome of that.
Yeah, I was going to say those guys probably don't hang around the team too much longer if they can't pass that part and get it back. So you get back from
totally.
You get back from your first deployment. How quickly do you get to your second one, which is in Afghanistan?
Yeah, so our workups are pretty long, because we have to do so much stuff. Sea, air, land. We train a lot of different missions and a lot of different skill sets. So our workup between deployments, in my time again, I think the cycle might be a little bit different now, but it was like a year and a half, and then we get back to deployment.
Okay, so when do you get to Afghanistan?
2010, got to Afghanistan.
And where were you? What was your mission? Same thing, just kicking indoors, finding bad guys?
Kinda, yes and no.
More like going through villages. Not as many doors in Afghanistan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not necessarily target buildings, more like whole villages. But we got to Afghanistan in 2010, and at that time, the coin strategy was really prevalent, and VSOs were a thing. Yeah, I'm pretty sure all this stuff is unclassified. I think you can look it all up all over the internet.
Yeah, and when Josh says coin, it's just counterinsurgency operations. For those who are listening and don't know what coin is.
Yeah, so coin has been around for a long time, but the way they tried to do it in Afghanistan was kind of different. We were doing these things called village stability operations, which they wanted us to go out and live basically and, be a part of the culture there. But where we were in Afghanistan, this was probably the worst possible way to try and operate for a number of reasons. When we first got there, we were doing straight up missions to take back the valley, because our valley was constantly being encroached on by the Taliban. Do you
remember what province you were in?
What FOB? Nabahar.
Oh, no, what province I meant. In Afghanistan.
Oh, I'm sorry, Zabul province.
Okay, all right.
Zabul province.
And that is northwest, right?
Northeast.
Northeast.
It's northeast of Helmand and west of Paktika.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So, but the first bit of deployment, we're trying to really just kind of take back some area in our valley, because I think like a year before that there was a huge, or maybe a year and a half before that, the Taliban almost took over the FOB in a couple different attacks. So it was a really rowdy place, like a lot of Afghanistan was. But as we were like trying to, fend off this stuff, they decided to do this village stability operations thing with us, which we were only our platoon out there. So we had like 30 guys on this FOB the size of like a high school soccer stadium, totally cut off from everything else. The only way we could get food in there was by airdrops. We were on the fringe, like totally out there, completely on our own almost. And so now they wanted us to focus on this other mission set and kind of take, basically because our numbers were so low, we couldn't push back the Taliban anymore like we were, because they wanted us to go focus on this mission, this village stability operations. And instead of taking back the valley, they wanted us to go live in a village and maintain our FOB, which with our numbers, it was, next to impossible. We did it, obviously, but it was so silly and just, it didn't make any sense. And none of the commanders that wanted to do this would come to our FOB and see why it didn't make sense there. Our OIC in chief were like, barking up the chain saying, hey guys, this doesn't make sense here. You're going to get us killed out here. But nobody would listen. So we ended up having to do it. And you'll probably hear this same sentiment from a lot of guys that were in my position over there, like SEAL teams, ODAs. You'll probably hear the same sentiment from them in their respective provinces, because, we felt like they were making us hanging out there way more than it should be when we could be focusing on other things. So that's the one reason it was kind of fucked up. And the second reason is because the culture of the people of Afghanistan, they would much rather listen to you from a distance. Like when you're right there next to them, they're not going to listen to you because they basically want their privacy. They want you to, leave them alone. And on top of that, they don't want you anywhere near them to where the Taliban will come try and fight you near them. So being close to the people, it just kind of pissed them off too.
Right.
And it did nothing to win the population of our valley. They were not down with the mission set that we were having to do. They didn't like it. And, when the Taliban would come through these other villages that we could no longer, continually go to because we were stretched so thin, they would just come through and, pull the village elder out in the center of the city and beat his ass with these sticks. And all the locals would be like, okay, Taliban rules here. They have the iron fist. We're going to listen to them and follow what they do because you guys are off sitting in your mud hut, not coming and letting me know that you've got my back. So it was a really bad mission. And the platoon that came in directly after us ended up pulling out of that VSO site because they were able to get their head shit to understand that it wasn't viable and it was a bad way to go about the mission. And so they pulled their guys out, but left some Afghanis there. And they were trying to maintain contact with their Afghani army counterparts that they had maintaining the VSO, and they lost contact with them. And they went out there like 1 day later or 2 days later. I think they had 10 that they left in there. All of them were dead with their throats slit, like laying in bed.
Wow.
So after the Americans had pulled out, some, Taliban assassins had gone in there and snuck in and killed everybody.
It's interesting the way you shed some light on that, and for whatever reason, I've always known this, but I guess I just never really articulated this way before. Is in the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan, despite the fact that they're both in the Middle East and the countries geographically aren't that far from each other, they're dynamically different wars. The amount
vastly different.
The amount of urban environment that you're in Iraq is just night and day versus the terrain and the environment that you're in Afghanistan. But the big thing I think you highlighted there, the population and the populace was so much different. And you had to treat them differently. It's like, hey, they're all Muslims, but they're not all the same. And that really is something that is poignant, not only from guys like us on the ground, but the leadership back in Washington, D.C. and everywhere else, and the guys not even on the ground who are sitting there, in a palace somewhere making these decisions and not really understanding the dynamics of the whole thing.
Yeah. No, I think, and don't take this sentence as we're all over there as a mistake. I don't think that. But the biggest mistake that I think our leadership made in this conflicts was not getting out on the ground and understanding what exactly was going on. And I know they're all busy. I know they're all stretched thin. I understand that they have all kinds of other commitments, but man, if some of those guys that really wanted us to go do this VSO stuff would have just came and visited us and spent a couple days there driving around, getting to know our AO, rather than just fly in for 2 hours, inspect our mustaches, and fly out, I think, a lot of these problems could have been alleviated. And I think the missions that they wanted us to go on would have either changed, or they would have, completely changed, or just, been manipulated in a different way for success.
Did you guys take any casualties on that deployment?
On that deployment, we did, yeah. Our sister platoon lost three guys up in northern Zabul, along with the guy from the platoon that we were ripping out with in a helicopter crash.
Oh, it was all in the helicopter crash.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it was a bad crash.
What was it like getting that call and hearing that information?
Oh man, it was terrible. So we were the QRF for it, and so we went to sleep while they were inserting super early in the morning, obviously. So we were racked out, like waiting for the call to stand by for the QRF, and somebody everybody's doors, screaming helo down, and we all ran into our little area where all TVs and intel stuff is.
Right.
So we all ran into there, and I could immediately see on the ISR the helo on the ground, and knew that it was not good. But we were still waiting on details. So the details came through, and our OIC eventually said who all was on the helo and who all had passed away. And one of the guys was my best friend that I owned a house with in Virginia Beach, and we were best friends, so it was incredibly hard. So I quickly walked out and went outside my rage. I smashed up some logs that were laying around and gathered myself and went back in, and we quickly came up with our plan for to do a QRF. And that wasn't the shittiest part of the whole day. The shittiest part of the whole day was sitting there being jocked up, ready to rock and ready to go, and you never get the call. So they ended up not needing us to come in and help them out for whatever reason, but that was really shitty. Like, we wanted to go help. We wanted to go be there for our guys that just died, and we want to go be there for the guys that were inserting with them and saw all that, and instead they just decided to not call us in. So we just fucking sat there all day wondering what the hell was going on, and not being able to talk to anybody on the ground. It was just a shitty day,
Josh, in an environment where professionalism is at the very height of what you need to do, and it's one of the most important qualities, is there room for emotion? Even with such a bad thing happening, is there room for emotion even when one of your guys falls, or is it still expected that you have to maintain composure?
No, it's definitely expected to maintain composure for sure. Yeah. But when I went out and smashed some wood, that was totally different. That was just like, they said it, and then we all quickly, had 30 seconds to go, like, realize what exactly happened. And that's what happened. And then went back in and said, okay, let's rock. Let's figure out what we're doing. And when I say, the whole day was shitty, yeah, it was, but, we were still just sitting there ready to go, just waiting to go. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh. Did you ever, at a later date, in a quiet moment by yourself, have that bout with emotion that you need to when you have grief like that?
No, actually, not that whole deployment. There was one time when they flew me up to a larger fob for a memorial, because I was Adam's best friend, and I met up with the boys from the other platoon, and after the memorial service, we had their gun stacks with boots and helmets. Right. We all gathered around that, and fuck, man, probably 16 out of 16 dudes were bawling their eyes out for a quick minute, but that was it. That was the only time that anybody had a big emotional reaction, or had the chance to have a big emotional reaction that I saw. I mean, you got to be locked on the whole time. So yeah, while you're over there, it's just, and that was the first week of deployment too.
Oh, really?
So yeah. So you have the next, the rest of the whole deployment to deal with it and think about those things. But yeah, you kind of just stay stone faced. Most everybody that I've seen anyway, I'm sure there's some people that definitely had way more than I ever had, and probably had some hard times dealing with that stuff. But that day when we were sitting there ready to go and be the QRF, one dude had the logical thought to come out, and he noticed that everybody was kind of loading up ammo and more ammo and more ammo, but not many people had water and food. And he was like, guys, we're going to be there maybe for 2 days. Like, don't forget water and food. And he's like, we can't just get down there and death blossom. You know what I mean? He's like, everybody knew this. Nobody was just going to death blossom, but one guy had the sense to like say that to everybody, just because in those moments, there's definitely, emotions, like you said, but everybody's maintaining their composure. But there's always, somebody who says something and somebody who stands up and, gives a little speech. There's always that type of stuff. You know what I mean? Like, kind of like in the movies,
Sure.
If that scene would have played out in a movie, I'm sure, whoever would be playing his character would have been like, guys, we can't just get down there and kill everybody. We gotta, it wasn't the locals' fault. We gotta keep that all in mind. You know what I mean? And that's how it actually plays out.
You mentioned movies, and I wanted to ask you this before we get to the end of your military career, but when you see movies about SEAL Team guys, whether it's Zero Dark 30, whether it's American Sniper, Lone Survivor, whatever it may be, what's your thoughts on how they portray SEAL Team guys? What do you see, and does it bother you that they're portrayed that way?
I think most of those movies actually do a pretty good job portraying team guys. I think it's more these new TV dramas that are really starting to piss me off.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically that one show, 6.
Yes.
If any of the people who made that show are listening, please knock that shit off. It needs to go away ASAP.
I've never seen the show. What are they doing that is inconsistent?
Obviously it's fiction, so I'm not, talking about inconsistencies, but what they're doing is just making me so mad is they're putting our traditions that are really special to us out there for all the public to see.
Gotcha. Like
all the things that we really hold dear to our hearts. Like when we were talking about the probationary things you go through as a new guy, there's things that I glanced over that I don't tell people. That's meant to stay hidden in our community. It's meant to be ours, but these shows are somehow finding all this stuff out and putting it out there for everyone to see. There's certain things that are meant to be sacred, and I wish the people that make those shows would realize that.
When you mentioned
that's how I feel about some of the stuff.
When you mentioned that stuff is getting out there and you don't know how, I just brings a bell in my head to ask.
I know how, but
well, from that standpoint, Mark Owens, who wrote the book No Easy Day, Mark Owens is the pen name, about SEAL Team 6, who went and killed Osama bin Laden, and obviously talked about other things that SEAL Team 6 had done. Captain Phillips was another one. Does it bother you when one of your former team guys is willing to go so public with things?
Yeah, it really does. There's exceptions though. There's definitely exceptions, like certain books like Lone Survivor.
Marcus Luttrell, yeah.
The first 80 pages are not interesting to me because it's about buds, and I went through buds.
See, it's funny.
But
I read that. I thought that part was great. I enjoyed every part of that. But again, I don't have the perspective you do. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But after that, I thought it was an incredible story about a couple of guys who got in some shit and fought hard and had each other's backs. I don't think Marcus wrote that book for himself or about himself. He wrote it for his boys.
Right.
He wrote it for them. So everybody could know the actions they took on that day. So books like that are great. Books like, the Mark Owen book and other ones, I don't like. I really, really don't like those. There's one, though, about a guy named Adam Brown that is just, I haven't read it, but everyone I know that has read it and I've talked to you about it, it's like an incredible book. It's Adam Brown. He's the guy that died saving his friends. And he had like an incredible story. And the book is all about perseverance and stuff like that. And so those books are cool, definitely. But the guys that are just kind of writing books and, you know, talking about the cool missions they went on and that stuff, I really don't like those things. And if those guys are listening, I'm sorry. It's just, you know, it's just the way I feel. You know, we're supposed to join the military and be in the SEAL teams and have this characteristic of humility. You know, we don't go out in the night and do these things to bad people because we want to talk about it. You know, we do it because it's supposed to be not talked about. It's just supposed to be something we do in the name of our brothers and in our country. And yeah, I really wish people would stop spraying about that stuff.
Yeah. And by the way,
but some of the movies, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, by the way, Lone Survivor, the book was off the charts. I thought the movie sucked. I didn't even think they did the book justice. I thought it was Hollywood. I thought it was bastardized. I you know, that the ending didn't go that way. You know, they just,
right.
They made it Hollywood for the sake of Hollywood. And my whole thing is, and we've talked with actually people who work in Hollywood on this podcast, if you're going to make a military movie, you owe it to the people watching to make it as accurate as possible. Because that's really the true depiction of what went on. That's the only thing that bothers me.
Yeah, totally. 100%. I mean, that's an incredible point to bring up. And, you know, there's other movies too that are pretty cool that, there's, I think 3 movies now that, portray scenes where my friends died. So that was always like really weird. You know, I went and saw Zero Dark 30 in the movie theater.
Yeah.
And I had no clue that there was a certain scene in that movie, until it started playing out in the movie. And I realized, like, holy shit, they're about to show me in a Hollywood movie how my friend died. And there's been 2 other movies like that. And it's just, yeah, it's kind of weird. It's not necessarily hard. It's just like, wow, the events that I've lived through and that my friends have lived through are now part of history and getting portrayed in movies. And it's just like, it's kind of strange, you know. I mean, it's a weird evolution of events.
If you don't feel comfortable asking, are you talking about the scene where Humam Al-Balawi comes in and detonates the car bomb inside the American base in Afghanistan?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
One of my good friends, Jeremy Wise, who was a team guy before he was a contractor, was killed in that incident.
Oh,
and,
wow.
Yeah, he was like one of my mentors, you know, and we did a platoon together. And he got out of the SEAL teams and was contracting at that time. And yeah, it was just insane to see that, like, on a huge screen in front of my face. And I just had no clue that it was happening.
Well, hey, I'm sorry.
But there's
about
other
that, man.
stuff in that movie. Oh yeah, I mean, it happened in a couple movies, you know. But I guess it's just the nature of the beast, you know.
Sure.
But what's really cool about some things that these movies do is there's a scene later in Zero Dark 30 when they're jocking up to go on the mission.
Yeah.
Some of those guys were wearing patches of dudes that had gotten killed at my team.
Oh wow.
So you know. Oh yeah, and that was really cool. And you know, only I would know that, or only me and other dudes that were at my team would be able to notice those things because we're the only ones that know about those patches. So stuff like that is super cool when I see that the people making these movies take the time and effort to put in a little tiny tribute, you know, to the military, to the guys that they're trying to portray in these flicks.
Well said. Certainly a poignant point that you bring up. And with that, tell me about why and how your time at the SEALs ended, because you got out fairly quickly after that.
Yeah, I got out in 2011. You know, like I said, in that deployment to Afghanistan, we were going from, you know, being really offensive to doing this VSO operation to, seemed like at the end kind of like handing out candy and rice. And it seemed like the war was totally winding down and kind of going away. I think we were actively pulling out of Iraq at the time. And,
I was there.
yeah,
I literally went to Iraq for all of 2007 to leave. And when I got there with my unit, I looked at everybody. I said, guys, we're here to leave. When that happens, I don't know, but we're here to leave. That's it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And so it really seemed like, it's kind of funny when I was in Baghdad, we were watching Obama get elected on the television, and we were all thinking like, oh, great, we're going to lose all our support. We're all going to die out here. Obviously, none of that happened. But we just thought with the change of, from Republican to Democrat, that all the financial support for the war would go away and we'd lose our assets and we'd be left out hanging out to dry. But we weren't, obviously. It's just funny the things you think. But, obviously his plan was to eventually pull out. So I thought that we were kind of going to leave both countries altogether. And I, I was still in my 20s, and I kind of was like, well, the military is awesome, but I don't want to be in the military in peacetime. I didn't join the military for a career. More power to the guys that do, don't get me wrong. But I just, I joined the military to go kind of to war and serve my country. So
that's crazy, Josh,
like that was
because
all done with.
But guys who choose that line of work when it comes to special ops, they get sucked in, man. Like, and they get sucked in for the right reason. It's that it's about the guy next to me. It's about my boys. It's about my team. It's not about me. So you kind of sacrifice whatever dreams you had or whatever thoughts you had. And guys stay around the team life for a long time. One, because they enjoy it, but two, because, well, they're there to protect each other. And I think it's great. I'm not denigrating you by any stretch that you were able to make that decision and say, hey, look, I'm going to go do something else.
Yeah, totally. No, you're like absolutely right. And it was definitely like a really hard decision to make. And my boys went back their next deployment and lost 3 more guys in country. Two were killed, 1 committed suicide in country. But it was,
oh man,
their next deployment was really, really shitty. And I was talking to them while that stuff was going on, and it was really hard not to be there with them at that time. So yeah, it was definitely a hard decision. I mean, the war did not wind down exactly the way I thought it did, but yeah, I mean, I've been trying to get back in the reserves actually for like the last 2 years.
Oh wow!
I've just had paperwork holdups. Yeah. So
if there's any recruiters listening, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, totally. If there's any congressmen listening that can help me out too, let's lend a hand. But yeah, I definitely miss the camaraderie and miss all that stuff, and have been trying to get back into the reserve. So you bring up a really good point, and it was a hard choice to make.
So tell me about Mission Memorial Day and how that got started.
Yeah, totally. So Mission Memorial Day, kind of a long progression. To go down deep into the roots of it, in 2011, August 6th, a helicopter got shot down with 17 SEALs on it and 31 Americans. Yep. It's called Extortion 17. Really tragic day, and I was living in Virginia Beach at the time, and I've never seen a town that depressed in my life. It was a tight community, obviously, and man, it was a strange during all that. It was crazy. It was such a loss. But then, so a year later, I was out of the military and I was living in Colorado, and a buddy of mine was in town, and we were kind of remembering our buddies, that died a year ago, and it was the anniversary, and drinking and, the way we typically do it. And like an idiot, I got a DUI that night, and I kind of like swore to myself afterwards, I would never remember my dead buddies in that way again. By just drinking, I decided I'd remember them, by going out in the mountains and doing something that they would be proud of and want to join me on instead. So the next year after that, 2013, I went and hiked 17 miles to go ski a glacier in Colorado. So it was lined up great. It was like a mile for each dude to go ski this glacier. And that was like the first time I had done a real tribute like that. And the next death anniversary I did it for was Adam's 3-year death anniversary. And I soloed this peak out in the mountains called Lone Eagle Peak. had this just awesome experience and wanted to continue that trend. And then when I was working for No Barriers Warriors, guiding wounded vets out in the mountains, I met 3 other combat vets. And one of the dudes was like, "Hey man, you want to go climb Denali?" And I was like, "Yeah, totally. Let's check it out." And he wanted to do it with guides. And I said, "No, let's just put together a team and we'll do it on our own, you know?" And then we got the team together and we kind of lined out the dates, and we realized that we were going to be there on the mountain around Memorial Day. And so I had like talked to them about, you know, what I'd always done for my friends' death anniversaries, and they loved it. And then our buddy Nick also realized, like, hey, Memorial Day now is kind of mattress sales and like spring fashion shows and dumb shit like that. Like, it's not about all our friends and all our family members who didn't come home. And the meaning of it has kind of changed in the perception of the public. And we took all these pieces and made Mission Memorial Day out of it, because we want to change Memorial Day back to its original meaning.
Right.
Yeah. And so in 2015, we had our first expedition to Denali, the tallest mountain in North America. And so we put together a website, and we were gathering names of fallen soldiers so we could put on American flags and carry them up the mountain. And our one buddy, Nick, who just, you know, was a whiz at website stuff. I don't know how to do any of that stuff, so thank God he was there. But he put together the website, and after like a month, we hadn't gotten any names, and we were like, shit, does nobody care about this besides vets? Is it just us that wants Memorial Day to go back? And then he checked his junk mailbox, and it was full of name submissions. I mean, like, we had hundreds of names submitted with stories too. They were accidentally going to his junk. And so we retrieved them all and got them all out of there. And the names were from World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, and a ton of them had names with them, or stories with them too. You know, it would be like, you know, John went over to serve his country and, you know, died saving his brothers in Taji, Iraq, or, you know, so-and-so was kind of my hero, and he went over there and never came back. And I followed in his footsteps. And, you know, when I turned 18, joined the military in his honor, and all kinds of stories like that, really deep stories. People got into it and they wanted to share these details with us. And they were all like super honored and proud to have us carry their family members' names. So we ended up going to Alaska with, I think, almost 400 names of fallen soldiers written on American flags to take with us to the top.
That's amazing.
And so
that's unreal.
Yeah.
That's so impactful, man.
Yeah. That was the start. That was the start of Mission Memorial Day.
Well, I mean, that's amazing. I have to ask you about the record holder, or the record that you hold, in being able to climb every single one of Colorado's peaks that are over 14,000 feet and ski down them all. By different accounts, I'm seeing between 52 and 57 peaks within the state of Colorado, and you did it in 138 days. The hell were you thinking?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking I just want to go ski some mountains and have a good winter.
Yeah. Have at it.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of thoughts behind it, but kind of one of the bigger main reasons was, in all my work, guiding wounded vets, I kind of noticed that, you know, a lot of these guys were slumping, and they could get off the couch and live kind of a fulfilled life like they had in the military if they would just have somebody to show them that they could go do it. You know, there's all these outdoor athletes, but barely any of them are veterans. Barely any of them were, you know, served in conflict. So I thought, you know, if I showed these guys by accomplishing this feat, then, you know, maybe it would motivate some of them to get up and go out and do something that will give them that sense of accomplishment they had while they were in the military. Because I feel like that's the biggest thing that makes people kind of cocoon up is, they don't have their tribe of boys with them. They don't have their gun-toting platoon alongside them, and they don't have that fulfillment that they had while they were, out doing good work in the military in either war zone they were in. So I wanted to give my fellow vets something to see and something to get them outside and off the couch.
Well, it's an amazing distinction. I mean, listen, I'm not much of a skier. I'm more of a lodge kind of guy where the beer is. But I think it's incredible.
That.
I think it's incredible. I mean, it's a great distinction, but I think it also speaks to, that SEAL mentality that you have. It's laser focus, man. It's just setting your mind to a task and accomplishing it, no matter what stands in your way, and no matter how difficult, no matter how out of whack it seems. It's just, hey, we're going to get it done because that's the kind of guy that you are, and that's the kind of guy that team guys are.
Yeah, a lot of my buddies that stayed buddies with me through last season were like, man, I haven't seen you in 6 months. It's like, well, yeah, sorry, I couldn't really diverge from what I had going on. I had to really stay focused.
You should have just told him. I really wasn't.
They stayed my friends through the whole thing.
You should have just told him I wasn't really getting good cell service on the top of this mountain.
Yeah, absolutely. The funny thing is, pretty much everywhere in Colorado, once you get over 14,000 feet, you've got 4G LTE. No big deal.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's crazy. Pretty much everywhere.
Oh, well, that would have been a total lie then.
There's a few tight little pockets down in the San Juans, which is a mountain range in the southern part of Colorado that you don't have service on. But most all of them, you've got great service. It's pretty wild.
Well, listen, brother, man, it's an amazing record. You have an amazing story. It's inspiring, and I'm glad you shared it with us. And good luck getting back in, but more importantly, good luck with Mission Memorial Day. I think it's a fantastic idea, and I think the premise behind it is something everybody needs to understand. And as long as there's folks like you out there doing it, we'll get there eventually. But it's been a pleasure having you on the Hazard Ground, brother.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, man. It was a really good conversation. I look forward to maybe doing it again sometime.
All right, Josh Jespersen, thanks for joining us on the Hazard Ground.
All right, see you later.
You've been listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, hosted by Mark Zeno and produced by Matt Pasquarella. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at hazardgroundpodcast@gmail.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.